morning. It's Friday at 9 o'clock, so it's time for Coffee with Karl. We 9/11 is Tracy put on a great song and a great tribute, I think, to this day. And sometimes we get busy in all of our lives, but it's good to remember the sacrifices that were made that day, and such a huge, horrible tragedy. This is a great show, though. I'm excited to welcome our guest. Steve Ashby is the director of Pacific Northwest National Lab. Good morning, Steve.
Morning, Karl.
How are you?
Doing well. I just want to thank you for the invitation to be with you today, but also thank you for that very moving song. I was listening to some other newscasts today that reminding us of what happened 19 years ago, and remembering those who died and who continue to serve in defense of our nation. So thank you for that remembrance. Great song.
No, you bet. Well, maybe let's start our conversation off with where were you today, 19 years ago?
Well, I was still in Livermore at another laboratory, and I remember getting up watching I was watching the news, getting ready to go into work, and was on the background as usual, right? Just some background noise. You're getting dressed and having coffee and breakfast, and then all of a sudden you're having this cutaway, and they're talking about a plane crash into a building, and first none of us knew what it was, and then of course the second one happens, and you realize this is not an accident, and then staying glued to that and rushing into the lab and just being sort of in a state of shock, thinking what was happening, and so it was a pretty traumatic day for all of us.
Yeah, that's for sure. I worked for Caterpillar Corporation at the time, and I lived in Seattle, but I was back at our a manufacturing plant outside of Chicago that week, and I was in the office, and somebody said, I was staying in a hotel, they said, this plane just hit the hotel, we should go watch it on TV. So we went back to my hotel room and watched it for the day, and it was just, words can't really describe, I think, the feelings that we all remember. It was 19 years ago, but had such a huge effect that we still see today in so many different ways. And maybe we'll talk about some of those related to security that research from the lab has led to. But thanks, Steve, for joining us today. We'll get started with our it's kind of corny, but we talk about coffee or a mug. So I just have it says Tri-Cities, and it's kind of the shared logo and font and stuff that we share with Visit Tri-Cities and the Tri-Cities Greater Area Chamber of Commerce. Just wanted to show that one, talk about partnerships that we all have, and obviously the lab is a member and large investor in all of our organizations and help us from a community aspect, achieve some of our goals. So wanted to show that one is talking about partnership, but what'd you come up with, Steve?
Well, I was more in the segment, we started with this, and so I have to say, I have a utilitarian approach to both cars and coffee cups.
Ah.
And so to me, the coffee cup has to be large enough to get my coffee in it. So this happens to be one of the larger coffee cups I got. Let's see if you can see it there. But,
wow.
Whoops, it's fading out there. Can you see that? All right.
Yeah.
It's got the big 60. I turned 60 earlier this year. And so a friend of mine, a colleague, gave me that coffee mug to commemorate that. For me, it's special because it just reminds 60 is a pretty big milestone. It just reminds me the clock is ticking. For those who know me well, I'm an impatient individual at times. And so it just reminds me that there's a lot that we'd like to get accomplished, and the clock is moving on us, so I get on with it. So I just look at that and remind myself that, okay, make every day count.
That's a really great reminder for all of us. And since you brought it up, now I have to ask, so what's your utilitarian car that you drive?
Well, I have your mug, what's your car? I have an Audi.
Okay.
But the point is, it's only the fourth car I've owned in my entire life.
Oh my! Wow.
Yes, most people are probably are lucky if they have maybe 5 or 6 or 7.
Yeah.
I've only had 4 cars in my life, and so that's what I mean by utilitarian. I will keep this until I need a new one. So I figure I've got one more new car left before I'm done with automobile driving.
That sounds good. Well, Steve, we've got some questions here for you, but I thought maybe let's start with you. You're obviously a PhD holder and a scientist yourself, and I think that's how you came up through the ranks of the national lab system. But in your bio, I read that you're a computational scientist. So for the layperson like myself, can you explain computational science and like what's your passion or your interest in that science field?
So sure, what that means is, so my degrees are in computer science and mathematics.
Okay.
But I was looked at on the mathematical side of it, of how I could use computers to model various physical phenomena. So for example, one of the ones we're most familiar with is that we use computers to model the weather, and that gives us forecasts. We can use computers to look at proteins on the coronavirus, to understand how we might develop therapeutics or vaccines for that. My early introduction, in fact, how I first became familiar with Pacific Northwest National Laboratory is when I was a graduate student. I was doing some algorithm development, techniques of how to solve mathematical problems on computers. And I needed a problem to solve. A colleague of mine in the building next door was a civil engineer working on groundwater modeling. And it turns out the problem he was looking at had to do with the Hanford site.
Oh.
And so, still a problem with us today. But so computational science is about how you develop the mathematics and the algorithms that allow you to solve problems on computers that represent various physical or other phenomena of interest. And so that's the whole field of computational science, because it's one thing to have a mathematical equation that you think describes this, another thing to solve it on a computer. And in particular, to do it on the largest supercomputers available at any point in time to get the most accurate answers. So that's how I spent a large part of my early career.
That's great. Well, I guess we had on it's been a few months ago now, was from IDM in Seattle, and I believe it's infectious disease modeling. I know I'm getting the name wrong, but same thing, right? So they're using the same computational analysis to try to predict spreads of diseases based on a computer model that they create, and very similar.
It's just
what you've done
another
in the
one
past.
to use computers to model various things of interest. In that case, it's an epidemiological model of disease spread. Yes, UW team that you're citing has been been doing a great job in that area for us, and it really does inform some of our policymakers of what we should be doing.
You bet. Well, let's get into the lab, and I'll just remind everybody watching us and joining us in the Zoom meeting today. We'll use the question and answer feature. So if you have a question for Steve, you can post it there, and then we'll get to it. If you're watching on Facebook, you can post your comment in the comment section, and we'll get to your questions as we go through and try to work them into our discussion with Steve. But let's start off with can you give us it's a very, very broad topic, but can you kind of give us an overview of PNNL and really its role in the community, Steve? Just start off with that snapshot.
Sure. Well, PNNL is one of the Department of Energy's 17 national labs. There's only 17 national laboratories. We happen to be stewarded by the Department of Energy's Office of Science, but we're one of the larger labs. We have 5,000 scientists, engineers, and support professionals who do amazing things each and every day. And they're supported by about $1 billion of taxpayer funding, so thank you very much for the R&D funding that you entrust to us. They have to go out and earn that through proposal writing. A lot of people think that I get the pleasure of just getting $1 billion handed to me as lab director and deciding how to spend it. Not quite. Our scientists and engineers have to go out and write proposals, compete for that funding, and bring it in each year. And so my hat's off to them, because really their ingenious ideas, their creativity, having those great ideas and compelling vision of where we need to go in various fields that brings in the funding that sustains the laboratory and allows us to do the great things. Those 5,000 staff work across a variety of areas, ranging from basic scientific discovery, advancing disciplines because we're a curious species, to work that we're doing to improve and enhance our energy resiliency through things like modernizing the grid and making sure we have a secure grid, and then work that we do to in the area of national security, keep us all safe, and work that we do in non-proliferation and cybersecurity there. So those are some of the broad topics that we work on at the laboratory. As one of the Department of Energy labs, Battelle, which is based in Ohio, has been a company that was hired by the department some years ago, back in 1965, to operate PNNL for the Department of Energy. We're proud to do that. It's a great partnership we have with DOE, in particular with our local site office, PNSO, the Pacific Northwest Site Office, in which we work together to really steward the laboratory on behalf of the Department of Energy and the American people. So a lot of things go on. One of the exciting things in my job is I'm always learning something new. Just in preparing for this, a few new things pointed out to me, accomplishments we've had along the way, columns I do. It's just amazing the breadth of work we do at the laboratory. So thank you for that opportunity to give a plug for the great men and women at PNNL.
No, it's a great introduction. You know, as we all know, that I'm new here and came over from Idaho, and you know, before this job even opened up, I had a conversation with someone I know pretty well that's worked at Idaho National Lab for a long time down in Idaho Falls, and I just remember that she started talking about. She goes, "Well, here's some of the projects that we're working on, but here's all the cool things that PNNL's working on." And you know, it was kind of a jealousy sort of a statement. And then, you know, ironically, I got a chance to come over here and just, you know, feel blessed to be selected for this job. But, you know, I think that versus the other labs, my limited knowledge, that just like you said, that PNNL has such a broader range of scientific areas that they're actually doing research and development in, that's such a huge benefit to our community for sure. But
yeah, we do. Yeah, we are one of the more diverse laboratories, but Idaho is a great laboratory. I know the director there, and I like to say the 17 labs is like a family. We each have our own personality, and there's always that sibling rivalry that goes on.
Right.
But in time of national need, we come together like any family would to really support one another and support the nation. And I just want to say I should have began by you know, welcoming you and thanking you. I mean, thanks for this opportunity, but thanks for coming to the Tri-Cities and taking over TriDec. TriDec has been an important part of the Tri-Cities for a long time as well, and PNNL has been a proud partner with TriDec, and so thanks for coming over and joining the Tri-Cities.
Well, thanks you, Steve. And I have to say that you were the first person that reached out to me when I was selected and the announcement was made. So really appreciate your partnership. You've helped me a lot in kind of settling in, and I've still got a ways to go to get out in the community. Obviously with COVID, I haven't had a chance to get out there. Yeah, I remember you and I went to lunch, and I think it was like right before we shut down too. I remember, you know, kind of elbow tapping there before everything shut down. But thank you for that. I can't say enough great things about the Tri-Cities, and you know, real interest for me is the research that's done at the lab, and you know, and how I think a lot of times folks from our community and from around the area think, well, the lab and the scientific research that they do and development has a big correlation to Hanford, and obviously I think that's historic, but I think really the future and where you're going, the benefits of having PNNL here in the Tri-Cities has and will even benefit, you know, greater swaths of our community for that. And so, you know, from you talked about energy resiliency and storage. I think that's a great area, but maybe in those three areas, do you want to talk a little bit about how PNNL delivers impact in those three areas? So, you know, the very general science and discovery, energy resiliency, and safety, I think, is the third one. But what are some examples of, you know, those impacts for the community, and maybe from a community perspective, how can we help the lab and help that research, and then, you know, capitalize on economic impacts longer term out of that science?
Yeah, there's a lot there in that question, so let me try.
I know, I'm sorry, I just kept on reeling it up there.
Let me get back. First of all, you're right. Our roots are in Hanford, and so we certainly are proud of that heritage. But and we continue to support Hanford and the contractors there in DOE and that cleanup activity. But that's just one important program we have at the laboratory, and so we continue to work with them in that area. And it gave rise to a number of capabilities that persist to this day. So let me give a couple of examples. There's a lot that we do in basic science. We're known really as the chemistry lab. Many of the other national labs are known for different areas, but we have a breadth of capabilities. But chemistry and material science is one of our signature strengths. And one thing just brought to my attention recently, I was mentioned, is that we're part of a NSF, National Science Foundation team, that's looking at the environmental impacts of nanoparticles. So what's a nanoparticle? We're familiar with different particles. You know, just when you look in the air today, right, there's gonna be a lot of smoke particles in the air. Well, the nanoparticles are extraordinarily small. If you lined them up, 100,000 of them would just be about the thickness of a sheet of paper. So that's how small these things are. And they come about as a byproduct of a lot of things that we've done through industrialization, manufacturing processes, things like that. And these particles have been released into, you know, the watershed, air, land, just, you know, as we've made things. More recently, we've looked at how we can harness them for things ranging from cosmetics to you know, drug delivery, to life sciences, biological systems, and so we're looking at how to harness them. But one of the things people haven't really looked into as much, and we're part of the team exploring, is what are the environmental or health impacts of these nanoparticles that are now becoming ubiquitous? And so we're using our chemistry material science strengths to understand the impact of these nanoparticles at the molecular level in the environment or in the human body. And so that's one area of basic science that we're exploring, and I think you can see the ready applications there. You asked about what we're doing in energy resiliency and work there. A lot of work that we do in energy storage in terms of battery technology. And so we've talked in the past about, we all got their cell phones, we all curse when the battery dies in the middle of a phone call or something like that. You know, those of us who might want to be looking at electric vehicles wonder how much range we'll get. Or when we're looking at the grid and we want to use renewables, we have to back that up with a large-scale energy storage. So there's a lot of basic chemistry research that we're doing in there, material science to support that. But another aspect that we're doing for the grid that may be surprising to people has to do with work that a lot of it's for the Army Corps of Engineers and Bonneville Power Administration and others, is looking at salmon migration through the dams. One of the things I learned when I moved here about 12 years ago is we are very concerned about the safety of our salmon. We want to make sure they get through the water safely where they're going and to our plates or back into the ocean for the propagation of the species there. But as you know, as they're going through the dam, we can lose a lot of those fish, and there's certain regulations. So the dam operators are interested in understanding how can we operate the dams optimally and yet allow the fish to pass. And so there's a lot of things we do there. One of the things that we've invented is a sensor fish technology that is basically, we can use a little robotic fish that we throw in there and we can study the pressure impacts of the turbines of the dams and things like that. We've also developed little sensors about the size of a grain of rice that we surgically implant into juvenile salmon. And then we track their migration to see how many survive, what kind of environmental stresses they're subject to. Wow. And that allows us to keep the hydroelectric power production at optimal efficiency. So those are a couple examples we're doing there. And the national security, which is about half of what the laboratory does, amazing variety of things, but one thing we're really known for is our ability to detect certain things, whether it's radioactive material or chemicals or explosives or biothreats, at extraordinarily small amounts. And so, for example, we just had a technology we call Vapor ID that can quickly detect explosive vapors at a distance or illicit drugs in extremely small parts per quadrillion. And this would be similar to looking for a single pine needle in the state of Washington. Is that level of specificity. And this one just won an award for technological innovation. And it was featured on GeekWire. In fact, it was the first time any research or company from the East Side had been recognized by GeekWire, I'm told. It was for this, this innovation. Wow. And then, of course, you know, we apply this to things that we do in national security. We began the show talking about 9/11, and I'll just mention that after 9/11, PNNL and several other labs were asked to help improve our Homeland Security. One of the things that we did is we worked with the Department of Homeland Security as it was stood up to create radiation portal monitors that protect our northern and southern borders. And at present, 100% of privately owned vehicles and cargo are monitored coming into our borders through detection portals that were designed and maintained by PNNL staff. So those are a few of the examples of what we're doing. We talked about the economic impact. A lot of this stuff ends up getting spun out to companies for development. So for example, if you've gone through an airport and you've done the PNNL salute, you know this. That was one of the things that we accelerated after 9/11. And then we partnered with the company L3 to commercialize that, and it's deployed it to thousands of locations around the world to keep air travel safe. And we hope to be getting back to air travel as soon as the pandemic allows. So there's a few examples. As you can tell, I can go on and on, so I apologize for being long-winded here.
No, but I think that those are actually really good examples. The hydroelectric salmon sensor technology is, and as TriDeck, we are involved in that. We want to make sure that we keep our balance of electricity generation, hydroelectric being, kind of really that base load. But at the same time, we all want to have more salmon and steelhead and the native fishes be able to come back. So that's a great example of how the work at the lab has these broader impacts on our community. So, this scientific research and providing more data to come up with better solutions gives us better alternatives where we can balance out electrical generation that's carbon free with salmon and steelhead recovery. So that's a really great example. And I think, as you guys go on and as I learn more about it, I just think there's so many chances that you have and the lab has to really be that nexus in between what's the cutting edge science and development, and then what are these practical and even in this case local applications of that technology, which is I think really part of the mission of all the labs, right? That's kind of why we have national labs in general. Is that sort of kind of what we're going after?
Yeah, the national labs goes all the way back to the Manhattan Project, right?
Okay.
The founding of that system of national labs, and it was in a time of crisis for the nation, and we've kept that system now. We're in our 8th decade as a national laboratory system.
Wow.
And we're really there to tackle some of the longer term, more challenging problems facing our country and the world. We're an amazing technical resource of about 50,000 scientists, engineers, and support professionals across all 17 laboratories that are there to serve the nation. And how we serve varies from time to time, depending on what the challenges we're facing. We are a national lab, PNNL, but no doubt about it, we have a large regional and local impact, and we're proud of that. I think one of the things that does distinguish PNNL from some of the other labs, which may be a little more academic in flavor, is that we do have this breadth of interest from basic science of just wanting to advance scientific disciplines because of our curiosity and the need to advance those areas of human understanding, but then ask, how can we leverage that scientific and engineering understanding to develop technologies that make a difference, whether it's to keep us safe, to get the salmon through, or whatever it might be, and how do we then deploy it? Either we're doing it in the national security realm, or we turn it over to a company to do it. And so we're pretty proud that our folks have a record of invention about every business day, and we earn about 2 patents every week for the ingenuity coming out of PNNL. So that ability to go from basic science to application to the marketplace is something that does distinguish us.
Oh, that's great. I wanted to call out to everybody that we are posting in the chat feature as Steve brings up different areas of research and talks about some different things the lab's doing. We do have some links over there, so if you're interested in learning more about the topics and the science that Steve's talking about, you can look at the chat. And then while we're talking about the kind of this nexus in between science and research and then local uses for it, we have a question that is asking about fire science research. Has the lab been involved in any, from global warming to fire science research or climate change? I mean, as we look out, and I think I was saying, like, I just have natural light, so I'm a little bit smoky probably today because we are a little bit smoky. Nothing like the West Side or California. Yeah. But is fire science or climate change, Steve, anything that the lab's involved in?
Well, a little and a lot to answer both parts of your question.
Okay.
So certainly, let me start with the climate science and climate change research. That is one of our signature strengths. So thank you for whoever asked about that. We have one of the more well-recognized groups in the world understanding climate science and climate change and its impact on the world. And so we do a lot of work in there. Some of the basic science we do is understanding aerosol atmosphere interactions. So as the soot goes up in the air, whether it's from burning of fossil fuels or from fires that we're seeing, understanding what that does in the atmosphere is one of our key strengths. We understand what's going on in the subsurface, a strength going all the way back to our work for Hanford, as I alluded to earlier, and then what's going on in coastal ecosystems, such as we have over our PNNL Swim location. You put all that together, and we're trying to get a really good understanding, building an Earth system model to help us understand the planet and its climate more fully than we do today. One of those things is about climate change. And understanding climate change, regardless of how it's happening, what's causing it, we want to understand how it's happening and what we can do to mitigate some of those changes. One of the things certainly is with climate change, we're seeing warming, we're seeing more extreme weather events. The fire season is one of those things. We heard Governor Inslee speaking to that just recently when he was touring one of the areas. And so that's how climate science and change links into the fires that we're seeing. Now, as far as actually modeling wildfires and things like that, we do a little bit of that, but there's other labs that frankly have larger programs than that. Where we come back into it, though, is through emergency response. We've done a lot of work with first responders and giving them the kind of technologies they need that could be used, whether it is a firestorm or a windstorm or hurricanes and things like that. We do a lot of technology development that makes our first responders more capable and also keep them safe through other technologies that we've developed. So hopefully that answers the question posed.
Yeah, no, that's really great. Here's a question that I had about just even since I've been there and the number of times that I've driven through the campus, heading to North Richland or other places. It seems like there's a lot of construction going on at the lab, and it's really, in I'd say a steady state of growth. But as you build the new facilities, can you talk a little bit about what are some of those areas? You talked about the 3 areas and gave us great, ideas of economic impact and kind of that nexus. But what's the future hold, and especially with these new facilities that are coming online, Steve, and what can we look forward to in the future coming up at PNNL?
Okay, let me. Yeah, you are right. For those who do drive down Stevens and take a look, you'll see a fair amount of construction has happened. And there are phases of construction that happen in any lab's time. About 10 years ago or so, we had the capability replacement laboratory. That was a large federal investment that led to some of our current capabilities. But more recently, starting in 2015, we were, and a few years before that, we worked in partnership with DOE in our local site office to develop a long-term vision and strategy for how we were going to modernize our campus to make sure that it was mission ready for the future. We depend on getting the very best people at PNNL, and that's one attractor that I like working with other smart people. But we also have to give them the best equipment and the best facilities so they can really be as productive as possible, and that's why we're in this renewal. But we put down a systems engineering building in 2015, which is where a lot of our grid modernization research is done. In 2016, we put in a general purpose chemistry laboratory to support a variety of programs that need chemistry work. In 2017, we then put down an engineering support building nearby. In 2018, we had the dedication of Discovery Hall, which is a way for us hosting larger scientific meetings, both internally and externally, to bring more of the scientific world to the Tri-Cities to see what we're doing here. And that was going gangbusters until COVID. And so we look forward to being able to host more meetings there. The 2 big projects going on now, one is well into construction, and that is the energy sciences capability, funded generously by the Office of Science and Congress for supporting that appropriation. This is a $90 million construction project of a new chemistry facility and central utilities that will support much of the Office of Science work that we do at PNNL. It's going along very quickly. The construction team has done a remarkable job of staying productive and on schedule during COVID, so grateful to them. We expect that project to conclude next fall, and we'll start moving. It'll really provide our chemists and material scientists with some of the most modern and flexible chemistry laboratory space available anywhere on the planet. Right next to it, and we just had a site dedication a couple of weeks ago with the Secretary of Energy, is the site for what is proposed to be the grid storage launch pad. And this would be work that we're doing in energy storage, especially at the grid scale, to accelerate the development of new prototype technologies in partnership with industry, to really make sure that those grid scale energy storage solutions are conceived in the United States and built and manufactured here. And that's where I think, when we've talked with TRIDEC about this, I think if you look at those two facilities, which are focused on the basic chemistry and material science in the Office of Science facility, and then looking at prototypes of energy storage technology, that's a great example of what we're doing to bring basic to applied. And then what we'd like to do is work with TRIDEC and the state to see what can we do to attract some of these energy storage manufacturers to Eastern Washington, where we have the low energy costs they need and the low humidity that is vital to that kind of manufacturing. So that's one example where I think PNNL can be used as an engine for further economic development here in the Tri-Cities, and TRIDEC has been a great partner in trying to make that happen. So that's a little bit of the construction that we've got going on, and again, we're grateful to Congress and the taxpayers for supporting all this activity. It's vital to keeping PNNL the great laboratory it is.
No, those are great projects, Steve, and you know, we look forward to that chance to partner, like you said. And you know, what I think our shared goal is to really show how that commercialization and then that kind of location strategy can work, and build more jobs in the private sector that totally connects with that research and development at the lab, right. To build the case so that as we you know, the lab system goes back to Congress, and you know, as we talk about future projects, we can talk about the success of these projects. So, you know, the more successful we can build and show that commercialization and the privatization of it, that I think that just builds the story, and then, you know, keeps funding coming for PNNL to be really on the cutting edge of all those science and research projects for sure. Yeah. Let's talk about COVID for a minute. And you touched on it with the Discovery Hall as being, you know, this new facility to have larger meetings. And obviously, as we know, as we speak remotely here today, that none of us are having meetings. But can you talk a little bit about how COVID has affected the lab and you know, how that's changed? And then before I forget about it, as you're talking about projects with the lab and with Battelle, I just remember a while ago reading about when we were kind of coming into COVID, how I think a Battelle scientist, maybe back in Illinois, came up with a way to a method to basically clean or sterilize N95 masks, you know, at the first, when we were totally out of that. And then like quickly, I think the National Lab System and or Battelle came up with like a containerized system that was kind of a big oven and started to, you know, ship those out. So I love that story, and I think it's a great, you know, connection obviously with the lab system in general with COVID. But how's COVID affected PNNL, and how are you still able to, you know, do all the important things that you're doing?
Sure. So again, a lot going on here. So let me first of all start and say, you know, one, I was, you know, very proud of how well the staff at PNNL have responded to this. We do a lot of important work for all our sponsors to count us to deliver. And back in March, when it was becoming clear that we had to change the way in which we all lived and worked, PNNL pivoted very quickly to about 90% teleworking. And that was made possible because of some investments we made earlier on in basically keeping us more productive during snow days, and enhancing the connectivity of our staff regardless of where they were. And so a big shout out to our IT team for having, for seeing the need for this technology to keep us connected. And then it really went on steroids when COVID hit. And so we took, most of our 5,000 staff work in Richland on our campus here. We also have staff in Sequim, Seattle, Portland, and College Park, Maryland. But most are here. And we had to quickly go to teleworking, and we did that. We still had people keeping the campus safe and secure. We had certain experiments that had to continue, and then classified work that had to be done in certain facilities on campus. But we worked closely with DOE to figure out a plan which way we can keep those people productive on site as necessary, while the rest of us, and as you can tell, although I got a nice PNNL background, I'm actually in my home, which is my usual work location. And so that staff really made that pivot quickly, and we've stayed remarkably productive. We continue to deliver for our sponsors, meeting deliverables and milestones. We went in a very strong position, and so we've not had any staff furloughed or laid off because of COVID. And I know a lot of businesses haven't been so fortunate, and so I'll come back to that perhaps in a moment. But so number one is really preparation, and then the flexibility of our staff who pivoted to doing this. And we've been ramping back up. Right now, we're authorized to have about 40% of our staff, or nearly 2,000, back on campus. And any day, you might see somewhere between 1,200 and 1,400 people go in. I'll have to go in the lab for a couple things later today. We have a lot of protocols of social distancing, face coverings, temperature checks, health checks we ask people to do before coming on campus. They're keeping us safe. So that's how we're staying operational. And in addition to the IT team, I just want to give our Hemtech colleagues a big shout out. Our crafts folks and custodial staff have done a remarkable job of really changing how we sanitize and keep the lab spaces clean, so people feel comfortable and safe. Because what we want to do is make sure that our staff, when they come to on campus, feel that they're safer than perhaps if they were just out doing other errands somewhere else. And so that would not be possible if it were not for the great work of our custodial staff and the crafts people who keep the campus going day in and day out. Now, in addition to that, there's a number of things that the labs in general have done to try to help in the fight against the pandemic. PNNL is one of several labs that is part of something called the National Virtual Biotechnology Laboratory. It's something conceived and overseen by Dr. Chris Fall of the Office of Science. He heads the Office of Science. And about 7 or 8 labs participate in this. And we're working on a number of projects, looking at how we can leverage some of our science instrumentation to, for example, study the proteins of the coronavirus, help inform vaccine or therapeutic development. We're looking at, we're doing evaluation of different test kits that are being proposed. We're looking at different types of tests. We're all familiar with the nasal swabs. I've had that done a couple of times. I'll come back to testing. We're looking at saliva with other labs. We're looking at blood tests, antibody tests, a lot of things we're hearing about. We're evaluating those for NIH, FDA, CDC, and others, and just a number of things that we're doing in that area. You mentioned the sanitizer. That's really not a national lab contribution. It was one from our colleagues in Columbus, out of Patel proper. And so that was a great invention that was needed and deployed. And we're just proud, to be part of Patel doing that. But I want to make sure I give credit to our colleagues in Columbus for that. The other thing I want to give call a shout out to Catalyst here and all the medical workers in the Tri-Cities for all they're doing to keep us safe. One of the things we knew early on is that testing was going to be important to keeping PNNL operational. And so we quickly developed our own testing capability for PNNL employees. We can't make it available to the public, but we can use it as part of our continuity of operations. And Riza Khalil and our colleagues at Catalyst were instrumental in giving us the advice and understanding how to set this up, connecting us with various people. And so we're very grateful for that support. And now we have that ability to have our staff go and get tested and get the results back usually the next day. And so that's a big boon. So that's a range of things we're doing.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing we can do, and I'll say all of us can do, is just set good examples. When we're out, wear the face covering, socially distance. I know we're all tired of it, but let's follow the guidelines and we'll get through this sooner than later.
That's a great point, and that's a really great overview to such a huge topic area. I want to talk about PNNL's community involvement and support, which is huge. But before we do that, I want to ask one question that did come in for the question and answer before we can get back to it. But the question is how much of a focus will quantum computing be at PNNL in the coming decade? Could you talk a little bit about quantum computing, Steve, and then, out of your mix of all the things that you're doing, how much of a, focus will it be in the coming years?
Well, thanks for that question. Give me a chance to brag a little bit about things here. So I'm a computer scientist, and I have to say the concept of quantum computing still boggles my mind of particles being in two places at once. So I will not try to give a quantum lecture here. I'll leave it to other colleagues who might invite on in the future. But yes, we are doing a fair amount of work in quantum information sciences. And certainly one aspect of that is quantum computing, but we're also looking at quantum sensors for biological applications, and we're looking at and for basic physics discoveries and other applications. So in quantum computing, to answer that question, there's a few areas in which we play. So first of all, what I like to ask my colleagues, whenever you want to have a big fancy computer, the question is to do what? What problem are you trying to solve? And for us, we actually have the killer app for a quantum computer. Because I said earlier, we're the chemistry lab. One of the problems that we do a lot of work on is in quantum chemistry, which actually, as you might imagine, is well suited for a quantum computer. And so we have one of the world's best known suite of software for doing computational chemistry calculations, including quantum chemistry calculations. And we're now adapting that software to run on the quantum computers of the future. And so that's one area in which we're contributing. A second area is using that chemistry materials expertise that I talked about to actually design quantum devices and manufacture them, because we have the ability to manufacture materials with ultra purity. We do that in an underground lab for national security and basic science applications, but we think that same capability could be relevant to building quantum devices. And so there's a couple of things. Once we have this computer and we do the quantum calculation, what can we do with it? Well, one of the things I mentioned catalysis, or in some of my columns in the Herald and other work, it's part of chemistry. One application of catalysis is in basically looking at nitrogen fixation as part of studying fertilizers. It turns out that 2% of the entire world's energy production is used in fertilizer production. Wow. And if we can do that more cost effectively through better catalysts, boy, that would have a huge impact on energy consumption around the world. So that's the problem we're looking at. Now, in the whole area of quantum, I've mentioned a few things. I'll say DOE just had a major competition. They awarded 5 centers for quantum information sciences. PNNL is a partner in 3 of those centers. Wow. Leveraging different aspects of the capabilities I just mentioned. And so we'll be working on that. And we're not doing this alone. We created something called the Northwest Quantum Nexus, really leveraging the expertise in the Northwest. And that was a tight partnership we've had with both the University of Washington and Washington State University, but also with Microsoft and others. And so we've got a great partnership with Microsoft in this area. And one of the things they're looking to us for is that quantum chemistry code to run on future computers. So thanks for that question. Wow. A lot going on in quantum chemistry, quantum computing, quantum information sciences at PNNL.
That's great. And I appreciate your answers too, because you're kind of explaining, like, here's an area of science that we're working on, and then talking about how that kind of works out into these different areas, economic impact, and the things that we think about, boots on the ground, creating jobs and stuff. But I think those are great examples and great opportunities for us to work together on. So, as you engage with a Microsoft or other technology companies, what can we do to help bring, some of their workforce here. You and I have talked about it, that, so many times we have opportunities that businesses are going to come to the Tri-Cities because of our location and because of, agriculture and some different industries. But, what are our opportunities here in creating these higher paying and technology jobs? And add some great examples right there, Steve. Thank you.
Yeah, I do think we have a huge opportunity to really attract some high-tech industries to Eastern Washington. And even in the IT area, you mentioned, we talked about Microsoft, you see Amazon. And I was reading the other day, Amazon is going to lapse one of its leases in South Lake Union, which is where we have our PNNL Seattle office. And I think what's happening is that there's been such an explosion of growth in Seattle that, which is a vibrant area, and we're there for a reason. We want to be part of that community. But I think you're looking at businesses on the west side, looking at what are the opportunities over here. I think you're looking at businesses from California and elsewhere. Seeing Washington perhaps as a more business-friendly state. I say that as a former Californian. And so I think there's an opportunity. When you look at the value proposition we have, if you look at the work going on in Hanford at PNNL and some of the other businesses we have here, we have a lot of the scientific and engineering workforce that businesses want to see. People say, well, Steve, aren't you worried about competition for your talent if you have more businesses there? It's absolutely not. It helps us, attract, both working spouses who might be in engineering or scientific fields. And to me, the more attractive the Tri-Cities is to the high-tech businesses, the better it is for PNNL, because it'll mean we'll have more people coming here, more of the restaurants and opportunities those people want to have, and it makes it easier for me to recruit and keep people at PNNL. I think that as we attract them here, there's the cost of living. Today is the day you want to take, pictures of the air quality in California and other wells for what the Tri-Cities is offering.
Right, exactly.
Right, and you leverage that in TriDeck. The utility costs here are managed. I think one of the things we've been talking about working on is we need to work with BPA to get more electricity in the area, believe it or not. Despite having cheap rates, we don't have enough. We've had, as you know well, we've had some companies who are looking at the Tri-Cities opt to go elsewhere simply because we couldn't provide the base load of electricity they needed.
Yeah.
So these are areas where we could look at it. PNNL stands ready to help in any conversations that you want to have with companies about how they can appropriately leverage and tap into the expertise of the ingenuity of PNNL. So
that's perfect. Thank you. We're down to about 9 minutes, but I really wanted to spend some time on this next topic because I think it's so critical to our community, and it really identifies not only all the things we've talked about PNNL and your role and mission, but the support that PNNL and Battelle bring for our community, Steve. And I know here recently that there was a $1 million gift to the Washington State STEM education to advance local STEM education, and then support and donations to area food banks, and then volunteer hours from your team in helping local organizations. But can you highlight some of those things maybe that Battelle and PNNL have brought to the community? And I think it kind of helps round out this discussion today about the role that PNNL plays such a critical part of our community.
Well, thank you for saying that, and I'll answer your question, but first I'll also say it goes the other way around. I first of all want to thank the community for all it does to support PNNL and Battelle here, and whether it's TriDeck or the Chamber and Visit Tri-Cities and others. This is an extraordinarily welcoming community. It makes it easy to recruit people here once they meet some of the who will be their future neighbors and such. But the community has been extraordinarily supportive. Battelle, we've managed the laboratory since 1965. We don't take that for granted. But a big part of our success has been the support we've enjoyed from our neighbors here. And so we're proud to be part of the Tri-Cities, but also, of course, of the other communities in which we operate as well. So thank you for all that support. We are therefore proud and happy to be able to give back because of that support, and because we're here, we're neighbors, we live here, we want to be a great place. Let me start with Battelle. For those who don't know, Battelle is sort of unique in that when you look at operators of national labs, we're a not-for-profit organization. And that's one of the things that attracted me to it. When Battelle earns fees on whether it's licensing technology or running a national lab, that immediately gets reinvested into those laboratories and in those communities in a variety of ways. And so when we saw, and that's one of the things that attracted me, frankly, to Battelle, knowing that I was working for an organization that really was about more than just the bottom line, but bringing good business practices to the to the scientific enterprise. We do it cost effectively, get the best value for the dollar. And so when you look at it, one of the things that Battelle is really passionate about, from our CEO down to the bench scientists at PNNL, is STEM. All right, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, the STEM fields. And takes all fields, including the liberal arts, to make a well-rounded individual or a community. But at PNNL, of course, we're focused on science and engineering, so the STEM disciplines are important. A lot of people have that background or affinity for it, and so that's one way in which we give back through Team Battelle, volunteer hours, what we do to give back and training teachers to be more effective at teaching science and engineering in our schools. And so that's one thing we do, and that was really about the $1 million gift you mentioned, so thank you. And that was a way in which Battelle wanted to give back. We've previously made similar large donations for other things in the community. This is a chance, working with the Washington STEM Education Foundation, to really do something special that would focus on some of the more underrepresented groups, encouraging them to get STEM educations, maybe socioeconomically deprived, and work with them. And so we're happy to make that donation. As I mentioned earlier, we've been fortunate that we have not had to lay off or furlough any of our staff. Not everyone in the Tri-Cities or the other cities in which we operate have been so fortunate. And so we've been able to take some of the resources that we usually use, for example, on catering meals for business lunches and things like that at the lab, and instead use that to send meals out to first responders or medical servers or just to the food banks. And we've made a couple of large donations recently, as have other Hanford contractors. And so I think this is a couple of ways in which we try to give back and then just be part of the community by being on boards and being active. And it's just because, we live here, we appreciate the great communities in which we have the pleasure of operating and being a part of. So thanks, it means a lot to us. And again, just thanks to the community for being such great neighbors and supporters of the laboratory.
Oh, you bet. And that, I appreciate your characterization of that and just describing what that relationship is, because it really is a relationship. It literally is a two-way street, and those are great examples of the way that works. You talked about STEM education a little bit, and just any research that's going on in PNNL about remote learning and STEM education in general. Maybe obviously with COVID, we're all doing a lot more remote learning than we did before, but any innovations that I guess it's just a very general question. I think it's a challenge. My two kids are doing some remote learning, and they're doing pretty well with it, but I know not everybody is. And you talked about some of the folks out there where Battelle and PNNL have been involved in, trying to help some of the groups that didn't have access, in the past. But any ideas or thoughts about kind of for STEM education, maybe particularly in remote learning, Steve, that areas of innovation that maybe might be some future research for, if not PNNL, some of the other lab systems?
And so we certainly do a lot in how we try to support the teaching of STEM, from K through 12 all the way up into work we do with undergraduates and graduate students. And so we have a great program at the lab supporting teachers. And given the pandemic, we're looking, in fact, with that $1 million gift of how we can leverage some of the technologies and capabilities that we've used at PNNL to keep us productive and engaged during COVID, and how those could be adapted to a school environment. And so there's things there. There's a number of technologies we're looking at in terms of virtual reality and augmented reality that might be useful. And so I think it's still early days in looking at this. We're all experimenting.
Yeah.
I really feel for those who've got young children. Mine are out of school now, but it's difficult. And so we're looking at, what I do know is that the staff we've got working in this area who have that passion are certain to be looking at how they can apply their expertise and bring some of that knowledge to bear on helping the kids get through this pandemic year.
Oh, that's great. I appreciate that that insight. Looks like we're almost out of time, Steve, but like I got to tell you, on all these topics that you kind of give the overview on, I've got like a lot of questions. I could probably ask you questions, and realizing that you've got people on your team that'd be better. But, you know, as we go through these Coffee with Karls, we really appreciate your support. And, you know, it'd be maybe great if we could get some other team members on and highlight some of these specific areas that you've talked about today. So, you know, we'll look forward to those meetings together. But do you want to have just a closing statement, Steve? And I just want to thank you again for your partnership with TriDeck, you know, from the lab's perspective, for you know, just the interaction that you and I have had since I've been here. It's really been great, and I look forward to doing more with you and your team, as does the TriDeck team. But you want to have a closing statement today?
Well, so first of all, thank you for this opportunity. It's been great. As you can tell, I really enjoy talking about all the great things we're doing at PNNL. And of course, I do none of it. So my first remark is I wanted to thank the 5,000 people who work at PNNL for all that you're doing to keep us going during these different times. You're an amazing group of people. And second, I just want to thank again the community for its support, for everything you're doing. And I want to thank TriDeck for not just this forum, but all that you're doing and how you're adapting through this pandemic. And so thank you all. And let's just, you know, work together to get through this pandemic, and we'll come out on the other side. So thank you all very much. Appreciate it, Karl. Enjoyed it very much. And I know I have several other colleagues who will be happy to come in and delve into some of these topics a bit more deeply than I can.
That's great. No, we look forward to that. And thanks a lot for your time today, Steve. This has been a great discussion. We really appreciate your help with the discussion today, and look forward to those future PNNL guests as well. So thanks everybody for tuning in today. We'll be back next Friday, and have a great weekend. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks a lot.